Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Wilmington Public Library's presentation of Dondre Whitfield, author of Male versus Man. So we'd like to thank you for joining us this evening, sir.
Thank you, my brother. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And he is an Emmy-nominated actor for his work on the daytime soap opera All My Children. I was first introduced to Mr. Whitfield as Robert from the Cosby Show, Vanessa Huxtable's boyfriend, and he's gone on to become a very accomplished actor. You can see him now on Queen Sugar, the character Remy Newell, and now he's adding author and mentor to his resume. So we'd like to thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Great, great. All right, so first let's learn a little bit about you. You have described yourself as two characters, so to speak. You have Brooklyn Dre, who is the guy who grew up in Brooklyn, and you have disciple Dondre. So let's start a little bit with Brooklyn Dre. So tell us a little bit about your childhood and how it was growing up in New York City.
Yeah, you know, when you grow up in an environment where there's much pain and much brokenness, you learn how to dish out pain.
Wow.
And how to break things. It takes a great deal of introspection to be able to, look at yourself and to be able to see your life for what it currently is. What I had to really do was to do the homework of self and try not to judge myself so harshly. Society already does that to us. And one of the things that I have a 16-year-old daughter, I have a 12-year-old son. And one of the things that I tell them that I think is that will be extremely helpful to them is that you are not the worst thing that you're ever going to do in your life.
That's right.
The thing that you do is not actually who you are.
That's right.
So try not to judge yourself too harshly, but try to assess what is happening with great speed, because every single day you have the power to be able to change what it is that you do so that it matches actually who you are. So that's growing up in that environment, around a father who did not have the tools and the skill sets that he needed in order for him to matriculate into manhood. And so subsequently, my father couldn't give me what he never had. So growing up again in that environment of brokenness and pain really arrested my development at a very early age. Wow.
So with that being said, how did you matriculate into manhood as a youth in Brooklyn, New York? And what were some of your influences, male or female? What were some of your influences that sort of guided you on your pathway to manhood?
Yeah, great question, brother. This is one of the things that I'd say that's somewhat controversial in the book is that my mother couldn't teach me how to be a man.
Right.
We have poisoned our women into feeling like that they can do that job without us. And we've done that. It was with great intention, but I think that we were misinformed.
Right.
The intention was to empower our sisters to do the job that was left behind by the biological father when he abandons his post. But the misinformation that happened was someone can't teach you how to be something that they are not. If I want to become a pilot, I have to get under the tutelage of a pilot. If I want to become, my mother taught me how to cook, but it didn't make me a chef. If I wanted to become a chef, I had to get under the tutelage of a chef. My mother taught me how to be a great human being. She taught me how to be a responsible citizen. She taught me how to be empathetic. She taught me how to be kind. Right? She taught me how to make sure that I did what I said I was going to do. Those are the things that served as the foundational base that I would then build my manhood on. Those things were extremely important. But I had to then get under the tutelage of some great men in order for me to come under or come into great manhood. And those came in the form of uncles, both biological and non.
Right.
We all have men that we consider to be, that's my uncle, right?
Right.
And he may not be necessarily be your biological, but he functions in the role of being an uncle figure that gives you information, gives you wisdom that you need in order for you to properly matriculate. Because we need information, instruction, and then we need accountability. Many of our young males don't have enough information and instruction and absolutely lack accountability. And those are the three things, those are the three key ingredients that allow our males to matriculate into manhood. So those for me came at a great time in my life where I was missing that because I didn't get it from my biological father. But then I learned how to do what great athletes do when they don't perform well, right? So after every game, an athlete doesn't just go on to the next game. What he or she usually does is they will look at the tape of their performance. Mm-hmm. They will go back and they will look at their performance, and then they will begin to dissect how they performed as it relates to how they want to perform. That's right. And so now you can see, okay, wow, I needed to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, so tomorrow's game, that's what I'm going to do. I need to affirm myself and tell myself, wow, you did this well. Let's continue to do that again tomorrow. But the things that I didn't do, I need to be able to make sure that I dissect those in order for me to implement some of those things that I wish to do in order for me to maximize my performance in the next game. And in the next game of life, that next game is the next day.
Right. Wow.
So those are the things that I did in order for me to properly matriculate into manhood.
Wow, that's big. That's big. And we're going to dive deep into that, as we talk about the book. But before we dive into the book, I do want to talk a little bit more about your acting career. How did you get the acting bug, and who were your first influences as it relates to you getting into the entertainment field?
Yeah, that was growing up in an environment like Brooklyn and growing up with some of us, the hood. Uh-huh. And you don't have people that are able to usher you into an area that you're interested in. It felt like it was never going to happen. Felt like it was never going to happen. And the only thing that really kept me going in the way of having faith, ironically, was that my grandmother would always say, if that's what you want to do, it is done because God said so. So I was really leaning on faith in feeling like it was going to happen, even though I had no idea how to actually make it happen. What I did know was my responsibility was to make sure that I was preparing for what I was praying for, right? And so that I was training, that I was turning myself into an actor, because what most people don't realize is that you might often hear people say, I never have the opportunity, or I've never had the chance. Everyone is given the opportunity to do something. We're all given the opportunity to do something. The question now becomes, am I ready when the opportunity comes? Wow. And many of us are not, because we're not preparing as we're praying. So when 15 years old, I got, you talked about, Robert on the Cosby Show, right? And so I had no idea that my opportunity was going to come at the age of 15, right? And so I would go to, get on the train and go to these acting classes in the city. It would take me an hour to get there by train, right? And I'm 14 at this point, almost ready to turn 15, but I'm taking the train into the city all by myself to do that. And then I would come home and people would say, well, where are you coming from? And I'm like, my acting classes. And people would say, man, you're not going to be no actor. And those were the comments that would literally be said to me. And I had faith that it was going to happen. And luckily for me, I stuck to my guns, kept going to those acting classes, because at the ripe old age of 15 years old,
Wow.
I had an audition for The Cosby Show, and opportunity meeting preparation
Right.
was the thing that allowed me to be on the most watched show in television history. And that opportunity literally changed my life.
Absolutely. Yeah. So tell us about that process. So you go out. How'd you hear about the audition?
Well, I was going to this class that I was attending in the city, had a showcase at the end of the year, and they invited agents and managers to the showcase. Mm-hmm. At that showcase, I was not only the youngest person in the showcase, but I was the only one in the showcase to have 2 scenes. Mm-hmm. And both of those scenes got standing ovations.
Wow.
So the managers and agents that were there at the showcase the next day called to see, if they could represent me. And my mother said, oh, well, I'm going to have to get an attorney to look at these contracts and figure out what it is from there. And luckily for me, that all, lined up, and I was literally going on auditions not long after that. Here is, I want to give people an important part of this story because it speaks to tenacity. I have always said to people that there are 2 things that can never be denied: talent and tenacity. Mm-hmm. You can be talented, but if you give up before you actually get there, it never works. You can be tenacious, but if you haven't cultivated your talents, you never get there. Wow. But talent combined with tenacity always gets you over the finish line. And I say that because I had the talent, I was cultivating my talent, but after 3 months of going on auditions, which in our industry is literally a drop in the bucket. Mm-hmm. 3 months in our industry is like 3 hours.
Yeah.
But I had no idea at, 15 years old and coming from, where I was coming from, I thought that was a long time. I called my agent and I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I've been wasting your time. It's been 3 months and all I've gotten are callbacks, which is essentially, when you go in for an audition, if you do well, they call you back in. And the more that you go in, the better, it is, because now you're going in front of producers and the directors and all of that, folks that have the power of giving you the job.
Right.
And at that point, I just hadn't booked a job. Mm-hmm. And I told my agent, I said, it's been 3 months, I haven't gotten a job. I'm sorry. And so I don't think this is for me. I think it's, it's time for me to hang it up. Mm-hmm. And my agent at that point, this beautiful sister who happens to be white, her name was Jane Chronic. We are friends to this day. She said, Dondre, you're extremely talented. And I want you to stick with it, because I have never had more faith in someone that I've signed than that I've had in you. And luckily for me, she was sent as a conduit to prevent me from giving up on myself, because I was simply mirroring what I saw modeled for me in my environment, which is that all too often we give up before we actually get through the finish line.
That's right.
And 2 weeks later, I got an audition for The Cosby Show, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Wow. Wow. So how was it working on the set and with Mr. Cosby?
He was, I can't even describe fully what that experience was like. For many of us, particularly, those of us like myself who didn't have prevalent or present biological fathers, he was a bonus father.
Wow.
He gave us wisdom. He held us accountable. He taught us about philanthropy. He taught us about professionalism. And so, in speaking about him, we have to speak about the elephant in the room. When all of that happened,
right,
it was devastating, because it's like hearing about someone that you have such great respect and love for. And so you're grieving, as a man, I was grieving for the women that were involved, because as a man, I have to make sure that I don't question what my sister says happened. She says it happened. I have to take her at her word. So I was grieving over the experience of what our sisters say happened, and then grieving over the loss of this dynamic human being that contributed so mightily in my life. And so it felt like I was going to two funerals. But that's what he was for all of us. People ask, often, did you ever see, anything? And we all say, of course, no. Because that was never happening in our presence. But that's what he meant to all of us, teaching us professionalism, teaching us philanthropy, teaching us how to be better, how to, seek higher education. So yeah, he was an extraordinary figure in my life and the lives of those like me who were in that position.
Wow. And as we talk about the book, that may come back up. But right now, I just kind of want to talk about, your longevity in this industry, over the years. And, many people who, have that one huge role, they call it a success, and their career ends there. Two-part question. Number one, what do you attribute your longevity to in this industry? And number two, how did you matriculate yourself from boyhood to manhood in this industry that's covered with so much, who's the popular, who's the hot thing, image and things like that. Some people may even use the word superficial, value when it comes to the brand of a certain entertainer. How did you matriculate through manhood, have the longevity, stay grounded through your career in the entertainment industry?
Yeah, great question again. I really feel like what allowed me to have longevity was being able to be flexible. I love doing comedy. I love doing drama equally. In fact, early on in my career, I would make decisions, in one particular year, from one year to the next. I would say, this year I want to do a comedy, or this year I want to do a drama. Because I never wanted anyone to see me and say, oh, that's the guy who does comedy, or that's the guy who does drama. I wanted them to be able to see an actor who was versatile. So I think the versatility in my talents allowed me to have this, 37-year career that's, still going.
Wow.
It's frightening to even say that number, because I don't feel that age. But it is, it's extremely special to me that I have had that longevity. And again, that longevity is directly linked to my versatility. And as far as me being able to continue to matriculate into manhood, having this kind of career that is marred with compromising yourself, compromising your integrity, compromising your values, all for this, the sake of a dollar and a role. My heroes in life, I think, are extremely important in that, aside from all the things that my mother taught me, my childhood heroes have a great deal to do with that. Muhammad Ali is probably one of my greatest heroes, because I got a chance to see him in action on the screen. Dr. King, was assassinated a year before I was born. But hearing the stories of his relevance, his strength, his clarity, his mission was extremely important. Malcolm X was another one. But Muhammad Ali, I actually had the opportunity of hearing about him giving up his title, watching his resilience, watching him continue to fight, watching him at times get beat up and come back. It taught me that I didn't have to be perfect. It taught me that that every single day, I'm not going to be judged so much in what I accomplish in my chosen field, but what I do with those accomplishments.
Wow.
What do I do with that power? What do I do with that influence? And I think it's one of the reasons why I often say that acting is my passion, but activation is my purpose. So all of the things, when I die, if the first thing that people say about me is what an extraordinary acting career I had, I've probably done a few things wrong, and I didn't do enough with my purpose work. Wow. So my book, Male versus Man, speaks to what my purpose work is.
Wow.
My acting gave me a great platform to suit my purpose. And those heroes of mine, Dr. King, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, those were the heroes that allowed me to be able to see that there was something greater than just what I accomplished with my passion work, that I had to do something with my purpose work.
Wow. Well said. Well said. So let's talk about it. Let's get right into it. So male versus man.
Yes.
All right. For those who haven't read this story, like, this segment is sort of going to be like, an introduction to the book, and, information for those who, did we lose Dondre? Okay, there you are. An introduction to those who may not have read the book yet. So tell us, what is the difference between a male and a man?
Simply put, a male looks to be served while a man looks to be of service. I think one of the most damaging things in our society today is that too many males are being mislabeled as men. Our society does not know what to call a brother who ages out of the title of being a boy. And so by default, we begin to hand him the title of being a man, when really he is still stuck in the mental, emotional, and spiritual capacity of a boy. So let's say you've got a what I call a grown male in front of you, and he's got great pecs, he's got facial hair, he may be wearing the accoutrements of accomplishment, some jewelry. He might be driving a nice car. He may even have been able to accomplish a great deal in his chosen area of expertise. That makes him an accomplished business person, but it doesn't make him a man. Many of our sisters have been taught to judge a male by, or a man based on his packaging while ignoring his performance. So manhood is not an age. So you don't turn into a man because you turn this magical age. Many people think that, well, you know, you're 18, you're a man now, or you're 21. He's got to be a man now. Car companies think the magic age is 25. We're not going to rent you a car until you're 25. That's when we think you're a man. The truth of the matter is that there are plenty of males who are walking around this earth in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. I know some in their 60s. Manhood is not an age, it is an agenda. And the agenda is our dedication to being of service to both women and children in our life, but additionally, as a loving but firm accountability partner to our brothers. That is what makes you a man, and not about an age, or not about, see, when I grew up in Brooklyn, we were taught that manhood is our sexuality and our masculinity. And neither one of those have absolutely nothing to do with being a man. I know some brothers who are actually effeminate, who are great men, because again, manhood is about your dedication to being of service. Remember that males look to be served while men look to be of service. So I know some brothers who can't bench press over 100 pounds, and they are great men. I know some brothers who can bench press almost 300 pounds. They're the worst males among us. So our manhood is simply has nothing to do with our masculinity or our sexuality. It has everything in the world to do with our dedication to being of service.
So don't you think, or do you think, that there could be a balance provided between being of service and still wanting to be served?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, just know this. The more that you are of service, the more you will be served. But that isn't your agenda. Your agenda, your assignment, in fact, when you were created with the intention of being a man of service. So in the book, I talk about how every man is supposed to be the walking tree of his house and his community. Let's talk about what trees do. Trees are the first form of shelter that we ever have. Before we had homes, we had trees. Why? Because they shielded us from the harmful elements of the world, right? If you didn't have a house and it was 105 degrees, in order for you to escape the harmful elements of the world, you had to sit under a tree. Otherwise, you'd burn to death, right? So trees provide us with cover. That's what men are supposed to do. They're supposed to cover the women and children in their life. What else do trees do? Trees provide us with food in the form of fruit, right? Not just physical food, but a man is supposed to provide mental, emotional, and spiritual food that the people in his home and his community can eat in the form of elevating themselves and restoring themselves. Lastly, trees provide us with oxygen, right? When we give it toxicity, when we give it poison in the form of carbon dioxide, trees give us back oxygen in order for us to breathe better. So even when people give me, as a man, something that's toxic, I give them back something that is holistic, that allows them to be able to breathe better, to walk better in their everyday life. So our job as men is to be the walking tree of our home and our community. So our first job, our first assignment in life is to be of service. And the more that we serve, the more we get served. But as long as we put service first and foremost in our daily assignments, that's when we know that we're walking out our life as powerful men.
Wow. There's a movement on in popular culture called the red pill movement. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, or the MGTOW movement, men who go their own way and, you know, are not subscribing to marriage as a way of life, and a family-based home as a way of life. Are they any less of a man, more so a male, because they have that mentality? Explain that.
I think that those brothers who are, you know, there are plenty of women who decide that they're going to be career women and not focus on building a family for themselves. And I don't think that they're any less of a woman for making that choice. But I will say this, to all of my brothers who decide that they are going to put their career, put that form of their life ahead of everything else, I will say this. When you were created specifically to be communal. You were created specifically to lead a family. Oftentimes, we distract ourselves. Oftentimes, we distract ourselves from the pain of not walking out our spiritual assignments. So what do we distract ourselves with? Sex, shoes. What are you going to do with 200 pairs of J's? What are you going to do with 200 pairs of J's? That's a distraction, right? So we talked about the sex, talked about the J's, you know, all of these different ways, the jewelry, the cars, the sports, all of those things are things that distract us from the pain of dealing with the fact that we don't feel good about us not walking in our purpose.
Wow.
I know some great people who have millions and millions of dollars. And they're probably some of the most in pain people I've ever experienced in my life. Some of the most miserable people you ever want to be around. Why? Because they don't know why they're here. Why are you here? What was the reason why you were put here? Do you know that many people who are of great accomplishment have absolutely no idea why they're here? So if you go through your life not knowing why you exist in the first place, you are going to be extremely pained by not knowing what purpose you serve in this life. No amount of money can prevent you or can give you peace. Boy, the day you realize what your purpose is, and the day that you begin walking in your purpose is the day that your peace begins.
Wow.
And every single day, many of us are walking without peace because we don't know what our purpose is.
Wow. Well said. Well said. And so you basically said in your book that we are pained, you know, if you are distracting yourself with flesh.
Yes.
And like you said, with materialism. And the only way that you can get through, well, when you get through the pain, that's when you could start being whole again and step into your manhood and lead your community and lead your family. So how do we address the initial pain that many of us are feeling from our upbringing? How do we handle and process and discard the pain?
Yeah, such a great question, brother. The thing that I was most or in pain about in my life was the disconnection of me and my father.
Mm-hmm.
At the age of 6, my father kidnapped me from my mother. At the age of 12, he taught me how to be an effective cheater.
Mm.
At the age of 14, I had a gun held to my head while I was told to tell my friend to take off his jacket. And so all of these things bring about great pain in one's life. But here's what I want everyone to know. That pain actually will begin to inform your purpose. Without that pain, your purpose doesn't come into full shape. And I have often said, as a coach, because I coach a great many folks who are trying to look for the answers or the keys to what's next in their life. And one of the things I tell them is that we will be able to access your purpose by sifting through your pain.
Mm. How do you do that?
There is great purpose in pain. So my father, he and I were estranged from each other for 20 years. Mm-hmm. At the age of 26, I told my father, and just to give people real context in all of this, I was doing all my children at that time at 26 years old. And I told my father, after he had gotten released from prison, I went back into Brooklyn. I was living in Jersey at the time. I bought myself a home. Everything that I said that I wanted, I got. Went back into Brooklyn, found my father. And I basically told him that if I ever saw him again, that one of us was going to die and it wasn't going to be me. 20 years went by till my daughter, who was at that time 11 years old, she came and sat down next to me on the couch and she said, "Dad," no segue. She said, "Dad, do you know where your father is?" And I knew that God was sending me a messenger that was saying, it's time. Enough is enough. 20 years is long enough. And I said, God, I don't know how I'm going to be able to do this, because when I see him, I'm just going to want to wreck his world, because I was still carrying around anger. Anger is only profound pain. You can't be in anger about anything without being in profound pain. And then it hit me. Instead of me looking at my father like the 70-year-old version of himself that abandoned me and abused me as a child, I had to begin to look at my father like the 7-year-old version of himself that was never given what he needed. His development was arrested at an early age, just like mine. So instead of looking at my biological father like the father who should have had all the answers in order for him to be the father that I was longing for, I began to look at my father like my brother that didn't get what he needed. Because as a godly man, not necessarily as a religious man, but as a spiritual man, as a godly man, I see my father as my brother because we share the same God. And I said, wow, that was the necessary empathy that I needed in order for me to conduct a reconciliation. So my father and I sit, we talk, and what I discovered was my father had become a man of faith too. Different faith, but a man of faith nonetheless. He found Islam in prison, as many of our brothers sometimes do. What it taught me was this: my father would have become a man sooner had he had information, instruction, and accountability
Right.
sooner. That's what he got in prison in the form of
Mm.
Islam. He got information, instruction, and accountability. And so I said, well, if my father matriculated into manhood at his age,
Mhm.
then that can happen for any of us if we receive the information, instruction, and accountability. And
Where do you
that is why, go ahead.
Where do you receive the information and instruction from?
Well, many of us, as I mentioned, my father, he received it, through Islam. He received it, in the Quran. He received it with other brothers that were mentoring him, that
Very
were
good.
serving as role models, right? My one of my best friends in the world, his name is Hassani Pettiford. He lives in Atlanta. And we often say that every man needs a man. We need accountability. We need to be able to sit down and say, brother, today I'm not okay. Because we need to have a man speak life into our existence.
Very
Too
good.
often as young males, we are taught to keep everything to ourselves.
Yes.
That if we say I'm not okay, then somehow that's a mark against our manhood. That's a mark against our masculinity as it's taught, right? In our communities. But it has absolutely nothing to do with manhood. In fact, a man is going to be measured by how he deals with his spiritual, emotional, and mental health. A part of me saying I'm not okay is a part of me dealing with my mental, emotional, and spiritual state. If I'm not being truthful, if I'm not being authentic about the way I'm showing up and about how I feel, there's no way for me to get to the other side of it. So, truthfully speaking, every single day, I have to make sure that I'm being diligent in the way that I'm dealing with my mental, emotional, and spiritual health, because that is the key to me becoming the healthy and whole man that I was intended to become when I was created.
Wow. Wow. And so with that being said, once you deal with the pain, once you realize that you are ready to step into your manhood, you stated something in the book that really kind of woke me up a little bit. You said, pursue perfection. And that's something that I've never heard before. All I've heard is everyone makes mistakes, try your best, just give it the good college try. But you are saying pursue perfection. And then once you pursue perfection, you raise your standard. Not that you have to, get down on yourself if it doesn't go perfectly, but just pursue it. Talk a little bit about where you came up with that theory and why it's so important to you.
So an analogy that I love giving to explain this away is, back in the day, they used to race greyhounds. Mm-hmm. And whenever those greyhounds were let out of the gate, greyhounds race around this track, get to the inside rail, and race with great vigor around this track. What many people did not realize was that those greyhounds were not just running for the sake of running. Those greyhounds were actually in pursuit of something. They were in pursuit of a mechanical rabbit.
Right.
Okay. I want you to think of the mechanical rabbit as perfection. The greyhounds ran with great vigor. When they picked up speed and they got close to the mechanical rabbit, whoever was controlling the mechanical rabbit sped the rabbit up. What did that do to the pursuit for the greyhound? It made them run with even greater vigor, right? They were pursuing the electronic rabbit, the mechanical rabbit. Did they ever catch it? No. This isn't about us becoming perfect.
Right.
We're incapable of being that. If God wanted us to be perfect, he wouldn't have given us flesh. Flesh in and of itself is imperfect. We already know that we can't attain a level of perfection. It's impossible. But the pursuit of it makes us greater. My son is 12 years old, plays basketball. One day he was trying to increase his vertical leap. So we go outside and he's trying, we lower the backboard. And so now he's jumping. He's just jumping high enough to touch the tip of the backboard. I said, I can't jump any higher. I said, that's because you're only jumping to touch the tip of the backboard. That's why you're barely touching it. Now here's what I want you to do. I lowered the backboard down and I put a piece of tape that was 6 inches higher than the tip of the backboard. I said, now what I want you to do is I want you to jump to touch the tape and not the tip. When he jumped to touch the tape, he missed it by about an inch. He said, oh my gosh, Dad, that's the first time I've touched past the tip of the backboard. I said, that's because you were in pursuit of the tape, which is higher than the tip of the backboard. So all of this is about us pursuing something that is greater than our actual capacity. But what it does is it increases our level of performance because we're in pursuit of perfection.
Wow.
That's how we raise our bar. We
Amazing.
never actually get there, but because we're in pursuit of it, we elevate ourselves.
Wow. Wow. So, amazing. And this is going to be a great message for our community because we need to hear these words of wisdom. So with that being said, let's hear from our community. Are there any questions? I know we have someone who's been monitoring the chat. Are there any questions that we could ask? Let me pull up the chat. Let's see. Okay, question from Richard Raw. How do we define manhood in context of African-American culture and historical circumstance? Our circumstance is different than other particular ethnic groups. Do we define manhood in general terms, or do we address it as culture specific?
No, manhood is across the board going to be the same because, again, we're talking about service, right? So as Black men, here's how we should be measuring our manhood. We know that we have to be of service to the women and children in our life, and that we are in greater historical pain than many of our brothers and sisters who happen to be white or otherwise. As a man, I know that there are times where our younger brothers and sisters are without the figure of a father in their life because he may have been walking in maleness and abandoned his post, not understanding that his job was to serve the children in his life. My job as a man, as a Black man, knowing that my younger brothers and sisters are going without a father figure, my job is to serve them for the sake of resuscitating and restoring my community. My job is to show that young brother who is without a father, my job is to be a model for him to mirror. For that younger sister who doesn't have a father, my job is to give her the experience of what it's like to be loved and to be covered by a man. Because I can't teach her how to be a woman. I can only teach the boy how to be a man. But what I'm teaching our girls is I'm teaching them what love feels like from a man. What love language sounds like from a man. What covering feels like from a man. so that when she gets to an age where she is able to choose a helpmate, choose a partner in life, she will immediately be able to identify it based on the experience that she had with me, a man in her life. Because when she gets that familiar experience, she will immediately be able to identify that as being a man and not a male. Mm-hmm. So that's where we as Black men, different than others in our society, have to measure our manhood up against. But again, it still comes down to being of service.
Wow, wow. All right, we have a question from Minister Risha Joseph. She's an actress and a minister, and she hears a lot of biblical lingo in your voice. Are you also in the ministry?
So I talked about in the prerequisite of my book, I talked about how I have done the Bible has, I grew up in the church. My family grew up and brought me up Baptist. And so learning how to come to a greater space of manhood in my life, I examined messaging in the Bible. And one of the things that I talked about in the prerequisite, and I make biblical references throughout the book without turning people off if you are not a biblical person. One of the things that
we lost your sound.
You can't hear me?
There we go.
Okay. And so one of the things that I talked about in the book is that look at the Bible like the tomato. Many people love ketchup, but I know a great many people who, while they love ketchup, don't like tomatoes. So male versus man is the ketchup. What I'm giving you, what I'm giving you is my life experience along with the tomato, the Bible.
Right.
I delivered you ketchup.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody likes ketchup, but not everybody likes the tomato. Mm-hmm. But the ketchup actually came from the tomato and a few other key ingredients that produced that sweet taste that you want to dress everything that you eat with. So yes, that's why I said I am a godly man, not necessarily a religious man, but a spiritual man. All of that came from my experience of things that I put together biblically in order for me to learn the lessons that I once got from the Bible, but created this spiritual man that you hear in front of you now.
Great. One last question, just who is your hero or who was your biggest influence in the entertainment industry?
Wow. Sidney Poitier.
Wow.
I can't look at him enough. In fact, last night, one of my friends and I, we were talking about how we wanted to do, particularly coming off of, Black History Month, even though it's every month for us. We said we wanted to put together a Black cinema night. The Uptown Saturday Nights and the Let's Do It Agains and the Piece of the Action and all of those great movies that we grew up with. And what I loved about Sidney Poitier's career was he did comedy, he did drama, he did it all. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I've prided my career as being versatile in that way. I never knew why I was so drawn to Harry Belafonte. But as I came to know what my purpose was and becoming this man of service, the more I examined Harry Belafonte and him being an activist, I then began to understand why I was drawn to Harry Belafonte, because Harry Belafonte was a phenomenal performer, but he was just as a phenomenal an activist. And I am an activist at my core.
We see that.
So, yeah, so Sidney Poitier, you know, brothers like Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte are what I draw my strength and my courage from. And they remind me that I have a greater assignment than just doing a television show or a film.
And you do. And we are looking forward to the e-course, because for those who really want to follow up and do the necessary work to matriculate into manhood, we are wonderful. We are very grateful that we have a great man such as yourself willing to put in the work and give us these directions so that we can live our best life for ourselves and our families. So thank you, Mr. Whitfield. And thank you for everyone for joining the Wilmington Library tonight. Jamar, do you have any announcements before we close out? Like us and follow us on Facebook, you know, and make sure you get out there and pick up Dondre Whitfield's new book and gift it to someone who needs it, gift it to yourself for your growth and development. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Have a great night.
Thank you, brother.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, Carl.